Today we're going to help you pass your Japanese software developer interview. I'm going to be going over each step of the interview process, the number of interviews, what the coding challenges are like, what the offer process is like, how to get a higher offer, and everything in between. So the first step is you'll be on one of the websites that I introduced to you in the other video. You'll find a job you want to apply to, you'll like them, and if they like you back, you'll get the conversation started. Then they'll invite you to a casual interview. Casual interview is, from what I read on a comment on the other video, it could be equivalent to a coffee talk in the US. Basically, you just get to know each other. You get to know if you would actually like to apply there, and they get to know if they would be interested in interviewing you. I don't know if people really get rejected at this stage. I have never been declined for a casual interview, but I've done some declining where they reached out to me and the offer just didn't look good enough. During the casual interview, they'll introduce themselves first, and then you'll introduce yourself, give a bit of your background, and then after that, they will go into a long talk about their company. They'll probably have like a PowerPoint or like a Google Slides ready to show you and like walk you through different aspects of their company, what their company's vision is, the engineering department at their company, their roadmap, stuff like that. Anything to do with the company is free game to ask at that time. You can ask what the working conditions are like, as far as ask something like, what does 1 week of development look like at your company? How do you decide what you're going to work on next at your company? It's a good idea at this point to be asking things that you could kind of tease out some red flags if there are going to be any, and really get a feel for how they actually do things. Of course, they could be sugarcoating things at this stage, but if things look bad at this stage, you can just pass on the company, right? So say things go well in the casual interview and you think you still want to apply there, and I guess they'll have you for a first interview. Like I said, you'll probably get the first interview. You'll move on to that. Their HR will reach out to you and adjust the schedule with you. They'll probably send you an invite link where you can choose from different time slots. Then you'll be set up with the first interview. The first interview may be different from the other person. Basically, there's no way to tell who's going to be in that slot. Now at some companies, between the first interview and the casual interview, there will be a skills test. So this is going to be a coding test, either one in an online editor or maybe a take-home problem. And the take-home would be something very practical, like make this small app in React, or edit this React code base to add this small functionality, stuff like that. For all the companies I've interviewed with, anyway, it's been much more practical things than I hear about in the US. I haven't encountered any leak code personally, but I've also not been applying to big companies like, FANG-sized companies or their Japanese equivalents. So maybe at those big companies, they still have leak code style problems. But for every company I've interviewed at, I've been pleasantly surprised with how applicable their tests are. And there's probably not going to be live coding. Out of about 15 interviews or so I've done here in Japan, I would say only one had live coding, and it was very easy, like array and string manipulation. If you knew how to do JavaScript, I think you'd know how to do this. With that being said, I made a really stupid mistake and they didn't notice. One thing I do want to say about the coding tests is most of the time the code editors are going to be in the browser. These are going to track every single thing you do. So these are going to track if you leave the browser, or if you copy code, paste code, everything you do can be tracked later. So just keep that in mind when you're working. Me personally, before I'd copied the code, pasted it into VS Code, edited and whatnot, and then pasted it back in. And I don't think they said anything to me that time, but looking back on it now from the perspective of someone that's hiring, I could see how it probably looked suspicious. At that time though, ChatGPT wasn't even big, so like AI code editors weren't even popular, but now I would imagine it's much more frowned upon to copy it out and paste it. So just be aware of that. Try to do everything you can within the online editor, even though they're much harder to work with than what you're normally used to. I'd say you're probably gonna develop a little bit slower because you're not used to this new editor. If you pass the skills test, they're going to then direct you to the first interview. If you don't, they're probably going to cut it right there, and usually the skills test is a blocker for the next interview. Since you already got the coding part out of the way, when you get into the first interview, there may be some technical questions, but it'll mainly be slightly more abstract things about how you work within a team, how you've handled certain situations in the past. I mean, you'll want to give concrete examples about these things though, and not just in this scenario, I would probably do this. You want to bring out your actual work experience and show that you've accomplished something good before, or show that you were a real team player in a specific instance. I've wrote down a couple of questions here that you might be asked in the first interview. I'll try to put some more questions over in the Discord, so come on over there and join us if you haven't already. It would be good to prepare answers for some questions like this. What types of work do you find the most interesting and exciting in your career? So you might say like bug fixes, I like cleaning up the code base or something. I would be careful what you say at this point because you don't want to say something like refactoring, you know? Because they think you'll just come into the company and then just start changing everything without a good business reason. You need to be able to frame your question in a way that it seems like you're thinking of the business first. So you could say something like, I like going back and cleaning up technical debt when I know that it's going to raise our bottom line, or stuff like that. I mean, you want to give some concrete examples that you've actually done something to improve the bottom line by cleaning up code in the past, right? If you give that example. But every question you answer, you want to frame it from how can the business benefit from this? Not just our code base became cleaner, because that doesn't benefit the bottom line, right? It could in the long run benefit the bottom line, but that would be better for gradual refactoring, right? So just think of who's listening to your answer and what they want to hear. And obviously you want to tell the truth during this part, but you need to spin it so it looks good from their point of view, okay? Along those same lines, another question might be, what is a feature that you worked on that had a large business impact, and like how would you measure that? Be sure to tell how you would measure that or how you did measure that in the past, because deliverables are important to potential employers. And again, if you just say, oh, I did this thing that improved the company's bottom line, but you don't have specific numbers for what percentage that improved output, something like that. You don't have those specific numbers, then it's a lot harder to convince them, right? That you're actually bringing that value that you think you're bringing. Okay, so if you don't pass the first interview, you're obviously going to get dropped. For the first interview, there will probably be only one interviewer, because at this point they really have no clue how good you are, so they don't want to be using, multiple personnel to interview you. This is going to be online. Every interview I've had so far has been online. I would say the only time it might not be online is if you're a beginner, you're really starting out and you don't have much experience to show. But I would say most developer interviews, at least the first interview, will be online. The second one may be in person. That's just going to depend on the company. So if you don't get past the first interview, they will message you back. Japanese companies are really good about messaging you back for every single step of the process. You're going to hear back from them. Usually that will be within a week. If you did well, you're probably going to be hearing back sooner, like maybe 3 days. I want to tell you not to worry if over 3 days have passed, but honestly, I would start getting worried because the longer it takes, probably the more likely that you're going to be rejected. Sorry about that, but I'm just trying to be realistic here. Really, you probably want to look at other options, and you should be having multiple interview processes going at the same time anyway, so you don't feel that stress of just interviewing with one company. So if you pass the first interview, they'll guide you to the next interview. And in the second interview, just like the first, you're going to pick out a time slot and set it up. The second interview, there's probably going to be 2 or more people interviewing you at the same time. In my case, this was also all online, so you would have Google Meets with, everybody's face popped up there. And it's kind of, for me personally, it's more nerve-wracking the more people we get in a single call. But being online really takes off a lot of that stress of having to, get dressed up really nice, do the proper bows at the doorway and everything. Even online though, you still want to carry some of that professionalism, When they first show up on your screen, you want to say, Hajimemashite, William to moshimasu. Second interview questions are going to be very similar to the first. I would say they would just expand on it and you would just need to cover more questions. So again, we're going to start making a list of example questions over on the Discord that you can use to prepare for that. I did have one second interview where there wasn't live coding, but we went over the code that I'd written in my coding test. And I failed that interview. 100% the reason that I failed that interview is because when they asked me to explain why I did things in a certain way, I hadn't practiced any programming related Japanese. So even though I was quite fluent in Japanese and I was really good at conversing, I'd done great up until that point. When it came time to explain the code, I was so bad. Like I was sitting there Googling the word for value, atai, and it was so difficult to explain this field that I'd never explained before in Japanese. So before you start doing these interviews, take the time to learn programming related Japanese specifically. Make your flashcards, do whatever you need to do, but get a lot of these vocab in your mind so you can explain everything smoothly and you won't screw it up like I did. After your second interview, it's going to take a little bit more time to hear back from them. It might not finish in those 3 days like the first interview did. And the reason is, you've got multiple people participating in the interview, so they have to talk amongst themselves, whereas before, it was just a single person interviewing you, and they could just make their own deliberation really quickly, right? But if you fail, you might get a message back saying, sorry, we chose not to go with you at this time, we'd like to keep in touch. And this is something different from the US, because I think in the US, every one that I'd failed, it would just be something really cold, like we decided not to go with you at this time, thanks for participating. But here they want to keep a line of communication open because it's kind of a small industry, right? So you'll probably meet some of these other people at different events and stuff. I don't know. It's just interesting to me that they keep that line of communication open. And you'll still be able to message them on these platforms, and they can have a history of their interactions with you and can choose to go with you at a later time if something opens up. Say you get invited to the third interview. Third interview might be a little bit harder to schedule because it's typically going to be with someone higher up. So it might be the CTO of the company, or it might be the CEO, or it might be the CEO himself, depending on the size of the company. Me personally, I think I've seen both. I've had interviews with the CTO before, and then I've had interviews with the CEO. And when you get to this stage, the last interview is probably going to be maybe 30 minutes, not the full hour that the other ones were probably taking. The other ones, I forgot to say, they might go over an hour, but typically around an hour is the average. But the last interview with this high-level person, this is kind of just a last cultural fit check. And when I say culture, I don't mean, will this foreign culture mend well? It's just, will this person, do they seem like a good person to have on our team? You made it past these interviews with all these other people, so really, if you don't screw this up badly, you're gonna get this position. I mean, obviously this person is trusting the word of these other people that have interviewed you. It's just they want to get a feel for you as well. So just don't screw it up. Play it safe in this stage. Don't go saying anything crazy. Say some of the business perspective stuff before, like how you can contribute to the business, but I would say just play it safe during this stage. Say everything kind of more reserved than you would have in those previous two interviews. Just make sure you come across as a genuine and nice person in this stage. One thing on the hiring side that I've seen a lot of that will get foreigners in trouble when they're applying to these positions is they will not be careful enough about how they speak of their previous employer. Really common to be asked about your previous job here and why you're quitting or why you moved on. And no matter the reason, you want to spin it so that you're not saying anything negative about your previous company. More specifically, you want to make sure you're not saying anything negative about specific people. You can say, oh, our company didn't have enough resources allocated to this department, and so I was just feeling more pressure and I want to work in a place where I can do more of the engineering that I love to do and contribute in a better way. See, that's more of a structural problem, and it makes it seem like it's not really any one person's fault. You don't want to say, yeah, the people on my teams were jerks. That's completely out. You're not going to get hired. I guarantee you won't get hired if you talk bad about one person or a group of people. I guarantee you won't get hired. So be really careful of that, because even in the interviewing some of my coworkers have done, I've seen people fall because of that. And that kind of applies to interviewing in the West as well, but I would say doubly here, because they recognize that as super toxic for the culture. Even just a little bit of that they don't want. Be 10 times as careful of that in this final interview with the CEO, which all he's doing is culture fit checking you. Okay, congrats. Made it past the final interview. And I was glossing over it, but there might actually be more steps in this depending on how strict the company is. But generally, I would say 3 interviews is normal. They're going to message you saying, congratulations, you've passed the final interview. We want to make you an offer. They're not actually going to send the offer in that first message. If you live anywhere in the vicinity of the office, say you can get there in an hour or so, they're probably going to want you to come into the office to give you the offer. They'll have a koyo keiyaku, it's like an employment contract drawn up, and they will give it to you and have the salary listed with some like additional benefits. I think, how many days of paid leave you'll have per year, that kind of stuff will be on it. And then you can choose to accept it there, or you can take that home with you, review the offer, with your partner or whoever you want to review it with, or just review it on your own. And you will usually have, I think, 1 week to respond to it. This is a very important part because you'll want to line up this offer with offers you get from different companies. So the ideal situation is you will have been interviewing with multiple companies at the same time, and then you'll line all of these offers up within the same week, or just overlapping enough that you can use one of these offers to negotiate a higher salary at the other position. That way you can get both the best job of the bunch and maybe the not great job, really good salary. You can take it and negotiate, say, I was really wanting to go with you, but I do have this offer from this other company, and that offer is expiring at this date. So that even puts pressure on them because they know of this system of, say, a week's period for responding to the offer. So they have to get a new offer worked up really quickly and give it back to you. Now you can ask for an extension, obviously, of this offer period. You can say, I'm waiting for the results of another company. You know, that's probably not going to look good because they want to be the number one company in your mind. But you can ask them to adjust that for a little bit and say, I'm still interviewing with this other one, or I'm still thinking about this other one. But you want to line up as many of these koyo keiyakus as you can. I was saying koyo keiyaku, but this is actually receiving the offer. The offer itself, you can call it a naite. The contract itself is koyo keiyaku. So line up as many of these naites as you can. Use them to your advantage. You know, say you have a really good offer over here. You can even say, okay, this one over here is full remote, so that's the only reason that I'm really thinking of going with them over you guys. They're like, okay, well, we'll give you one more remote day per week or something like that, you know. Use this to your advantage. This is one of the most important parts of this process. Now, once you get your offer and you accept it, you're probably going to be looking at maybe 2 months out before you're actually in the job. I think in software development, giving a month's notice is pretty common, but here it's common to even give more of that because you don't want to trouble your teammates or whatever. So I would say maybe 2 months out before you're actually in there is going to be pretty common. This completely depends on the company though. A lot of them can accommodate a much quicker entry. I mean, if you're not working at a place, obviously they can probably get you in within a month. That is assuming you're actually in Japan. If you're living overseas and getting hired, they have to get you a certificate of eligibility to get a visa and then apply for the actual visa. Then plus the normal time it takes to process, I would say you probably better plan for it being at least 4 months out. If you've ever been hired by a Japanese company from overseas, leave a comment below with how long it took you to actually get into the country. So that's been a brief overview of the selection process here in Japan. Like I said, I'm going to be making a list of questions, so come on over to the Discord. Subscribe for more software and development stuff. I also want to make a video telling about my foolproof way to almost 100% guaranteed get an offer at a company. I've used this I think around 4 times now, and every one has just been a home run. So I wanted to talk about that. I'm debating making it a members only video. I'm going to be trying to make more exclusive content limited to members, just so the people in this small group can have a really good chance at getting jobs. I mean, I'm not trying to gatekeep, but at the same time, if everybody's using the exact same techniques, it could be really crowded and beneficial to no one. Actually, it could benefit the employers more. So I'm going to try to limit the scope of that for now. If you're really interested in getting a developer job in Japan, that might help you. It's probably going to be really helpful because, like I said, it's techniques that I actually use to get jobs. Thanks for watching. Bye.